This week, we'll have some fun talking about Chuck Schumer's anti-Trump tip line that backfired in a big way. Plus, we bring you up to speed on key victories you probably haven't heard much about elsewhere, including major wins for Christian teachers and the defeat of the Fairfax Casino bill. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candi Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us for Speak Up Virginia. Today, we have some highlights on some wins. We thought we'd bring good news today on key wins in the legal arena and legislatively that you might not have heard about elsewhere. But before we get into that, I did want to share something kind of fun, just on a lighter note. Did you happen to see this tip line from Chuck Schumer, a New York Democrat, where he is asking for government employees or encouraging them to report, how did he phrase it, abuse of power and fraud and those kind of things, criminal activity?
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's interesting how this is happening because on the one hand, you have the Trump administration attempting to actually find places of fraud and, financial abuse. And then you have the Democrats kind of saying, that's bad, but here's our tip line. And I think they're just trying to feed this narrative that, like, the Trump administration itself is doing something corrupt or unconstitutional or whatever. It's just kind of ironic to watch these two sides.
Well, actually, it's been hilarious because the responses that have come in have gone viral. I think it was a pretty big backlash and maybe a way he wasn't anticipating. And people have actually been filling out his tip line with their reports and posting things on X. They'll fill it out and then share it on X. And I've been pretty entertained by this. So we thought we'd share a few with you guys this today. And so let me just put a few on the screen for YouTube viewers. So here's one saying that Schumer himself should be reported. Do you remember back when he did that infamous speech basically threatening Supreme Court justices?
Yeah, I mean, who can forget that speech? And honestly, I can't believe there weren't more repercussions for that speech. But yeah, let's roll a little clip of that.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, this is him talking about our U.S. Supreme Court justices. He is literally threatening them. And again, it's over the abortion issue, if we remember about that. So we've got a whole situation here where this guy's trying to be the keeper of all things good and right, and he's himself been really inappropriate.
Yeah, it's just really rich that he would try to pose as this principled defender of government integrity, after something over the top like that. All right, here's another one from Chris Martinson. It looks like he actually used the tip line to file this, and it's a complaint about Anthony Fauci. And I'll try to summarize this complaint here. We're putting it on the screen, but it's kind of small print. So basically he's saying that Fauci and the people he was working with, they had emails alluding to evidence that the COVID virus was actually looked like it was not natural, came from a lab. And then they put out other reports saying something completely different, going more the nature route. And he's talking about other things about how they were funded and stuff. So I love his little note here. It says, I filed this under criminal activity, but it has elements of fraud and wasteful spending. So, it seems like a thoughtful submission.
I mean, it hits all three categories, he's saying. But no, I mean, we know that obviously they were worried about something because Fauci has been preemptively pardoned by the Biden administration. So I think this guy is right to raise this one, but I don't think that's what Schumer expected.
We could go on, but, if you check it out yourself, you'll be entertained. But let's get to some good news today. And speaking of things that can open the door to government fraud, corruption, and crime, definitely the gambling industry falls into that, and that's been discussed and battled over in our General Assembly, but we ended up with the victory. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, one of the big gambling bills that was in front of the General Assembly was to allow a casino to come and set itself up in Tyson's Corner in Fairfax County. And so this is a big deal and has been the talk of all the Northern Virginia residents who really overwhelmingly don't want this thing. And so we're pleased to see that this has actually been killed in a House subcommittee. So as long as there's no parliamentarian tricks that bring it back through the budget or anything weird,
don't even say that.
Nothing's over till the fat lady sings, as they say. Like, we are not quite at the end line, but it is supposed to be dead at this point. So that's big news.
I think that's amazing. And I think it's worth noting that we have now had casinos blocked in two overwhelmingly blue urban areas, Richmond and now Fairfax. What is the significance of that happening?
Well, I mean, in Richmond, we had to stop it at the level of the people voting against it. In Northern Virginia, I hope the elected officials just listened to the people, so we didn't even have to get to this idea. I mean, they weren't really even proposing it go to the ballot, which is a whole I mean, it was going to, well, it would eventually get to the ballot, but it was going to go to the Board of Supervisors and that. So I'm glad that they would just listen ahead of time so we don't have to go through the pain and expense of informing the voters that this is what was coming their way. It's also really interesting, I think, that there were Democrats on both sides. Like, gambling is a thing that is not party line. It is one of the few issues that they don't break. So oddly, you had this Democrat senator putting forward the bill from Northern Virginia and a Northern Virginia Democrat senator opposing the bill. So that's an odd situation.
And they were both, I think, representing parts of the Fairfax area.
Yeah.
So it was Scott Serval pushing it and Jennifer Boysko opposing it. Let's just listen to a clip of her speaking against it.
Senator Boysko.
Chairman Bolova, I know it's unusual to have a member of the Senate come up and testify against somebody else's bill. I am representing my 200,000+ constituents who have been very clear that this is not an appropriate location for a casino.
Yeah, what I think is great about this is that in the same committee you have Senator Boysko and our own Todd Gackey, Dr. Todd Gackey, from our position on the same side. This doesn't happen every day, so I think we should listen to a little bit of what Todd had to say in committee as well.
Todd Gackey on behalf of the Family Foundation. We've had a long history of being in opposition to gambling in all forms, but I wanted to kind of point out on this issue that if you remember back to 2019 and 2020, the whole discussion was that this was to help economically depressed areas. And there was a lot of discussion around whether or not they would stay at 5 or expand. And we were concerned that this was a slippery slope, that it would begin to expand. And if you compare the median incomes in those areas to, say, in Tyson's Corner or Fairfax, it's almost doubled what those economically depressed areas were that the other casinos were being placed in. I think we also have concerns about the location, the density of this area, and the impact it will have on communities, and the question of whether or not it would be close to schools or other areas where families frequent. So I think for those reasons that I would ask that the subcommittee just push the brakes on this, to pause it, and to vote in opposition to this. Thank you.
Is that a first where Todd's lined up Todd, for those of you that aren't familiar with this, is overseeing our lobbyists at the Capitol every day. So is that a first where Todd is in the same line as Jennifer Boysko to testify in the same way on an issue?
I can't say for sure whether it's the first that with that, but maybe with that individual. These gaming issues are the ones where we end up, just interesting alliances, different people. So, I mean, it's not the first time. Family Foundation does not view itself as one party or the other.
Yeah.
It's just our issues tend to break one way or the other with a party.
Yeah.
So this is one of the ones where we tend to line up in a sort of bipartisan, and there are Republicans that vote wrong on this.
Yeah.
So it's just a big, messy mess.
We really are family first, and this is not good for families.
We invite Senator Boysko to join us on many other issues, stand up next to us in committee anytime on any of our issues.
Make this a trend.
It would be great.
All right. Well, Todd did ask them clearly to put the brakes on this, and it looks like they did. What do you think led to the defeat?
Well, there's just a huge outcry from the Northern Virginia people. They came down in buses to the General Assembly. I mean, I think the people of Fairfax are telling their legislators, don't do this to us. And I don't know why Senator Serval isn't listening, but at least others are.
Well, and I think that...
And there's 5 other casinos. Just, I feel the need to say that. There are plenty in Virginia.
I think this speaks to the power of families that care about their communities, because in a parasitic way, I think the casinos are able to come in where people are sold this bill of goods that it's going to help poverty. But when you have more intact families speaking up that, no, this rips apart families, that seems to be helping to block this.
Well, the telltale sign is if anyone saw the commercial that they were running in the Richmond market. So the people that support the casino ran a commercial for legislators. They're down here, so it's in our media market. And it was entirely people talking about how dare they block this thing that's going to create money, but they wouldn't talk about it, the casino. They just kept saying how there are these outside interests, and they were talking about the Maryland casino is trying to fight the Virginia one because they're close to each other and they will compete. But they didn't even want to say they were for a casino. So it's like, we're going to block this and we're going to say how bad it is without actually saying what it is. Because if you say what it is, most people don't want it. And so
Not in your backyard.
even watching them try to fight it is enough to tell you that families don't want this.
Well, we also want to celebrate some key wins coming out of our legal center, the Founding Freedoms Law Center. And I'm excited to talk about this today because there's been several cases going on, especially in the month of January, that we just didn't get a chance to tell people about, and they're really important. And we're going to talk about some wins with Christian teachers. But before we go down that road, let's just bring this update first on a case that's been in the news a lot lately, and that's involving this realtor from Stanton, Wilson Faber.
Yeah, so our law center is representing Wilson, and he is actually an ordained minister, but also for 44 years, he has been part of the National Association of Realtors. So he sells real estate, and basically, last year he was slapped with this ethics charge from his association, basically for a Facebook post that was about 10 years ago. So this is, it's, they have literally worked very hard to make this a big deal. But long story short, he stands to be punished for what they consider basically hate speech, which was him actually just outlining what Scripture says about marriage, and in the context of a major Supreme Court. We were right around that year where everybody's debating marriage, so he dares to, as a minister, say what marriage is in God's eyes, basically, and they're threatening to take away his whole career because, again, if you get pulled out of this, if you're not allowed to be in this association, you will not be able to have access to, people call it the MLS, the multiple listing service, the way that you, as a realtor, show houses electronically to your clients.
Well, let's just listen to this recent CBN News interview on this case.
Why do you think this is all coming out now in 2024?
Because the National Association of Realtors is woke. The leadership of the National Association of Realtors has made it very clear about their involvement and endorsing and approving of the LGBTQ community. And just recently, just a few weeks ago, actually, in Charlottesville, Virginia, the National Association of Realtors provided funding for a drag queen show.
The Charlottesville Area Association of Realtors hosted the November drag show in the name of a fair housing symposium, reportedly funded in part by the National Association of Realtors Fair Housing Grant. We contacted the NAR for comment, and no one has responded to our request.
So let me get this straight. So they can use realtor funds for drag queen shows, but he can't post a biblical scripture on Facebook to support traditional marriage.
That's the position that's being suggested.
Michael Sylvester with Founding Freedoms Law Center represents Faber and tells CBN News that while this is a violation of free speech, there's a catch.
So it all changed in 2020 when the National Association of Realtors adopted a rule that prohibits anybody from speaking what they deem hate speech against certain protected classes, such as sexual orientation or gender identity. But what's incredible here is the post that Wilson made was in 2015, 5 years before that rule even existed. He simply was presenting his religious views about marriage. That should not qualify for a hate speech charge.
Well, you can see in that clip right there, our attorney from Founding Freedoms Law Center, Michael Sylvester, doing a great job making this important point that Wilson Faber made this personal post in 2015, as you were talking about. And this is several years before the Realtors Association even had this policy in existence. And I guess they're using this policy that was after that to say it's essentially,
go after him,
to call it essentially hate speech. And it's just hard to think about this happening in America. I know we see it more and more, but just that you can post something that something can be used retroactively against you, that they can go back through your post and kind of comb through and try to find something that can be used as a tool to be weaponized against you. And that's just kind of scary.
Yeah, and I think people need to know that it wasn't even clients that brought this. It was other realtors, which I think is amazing. The charges against him come from technically his competitors in the field, not even people. It's not as if someone said, you were supposed to be my realtor and you've treated me hatefully or whatever. So that's absurd. But also, I just think people need to understand he's already basically gone before a peer group in this association. They've already deemed that, yes, in fact, it was hate speech. And so what the update is that just this past week, our folks went through the appeals process. So they went in front of the Realtor Association Ethics Board to basically lay out their case again that this is in fact not anything other than a personal use of your own speech in a setting that is not related to his work and all those things.
So is this the final appeal before that ethics board?
I believe this is the end of the line. When they issue an opinion, this will be the official opinion, and then our Founding Freedoms Law Center will have to decide, does this move from a sort of a private judicial setting where it's sort of, jury by peers in a sense, to is there a case to be made to defend his religious freedom in the actual court system? Okay, so either way, they're going to keep defending him, and we do need your prayers, and he needs your prayers over this case. And I do think this is important, has important ramifications on the professional careers of realtors, not only in Virginia, but across the nation, right? Well, this isn't the only place this is happening. We've seen cases in about 6 other states that are within the same sort of fact set where somebody's using personal speech and the realtor board wants to come down on them. So this is a concern not just for Wilson, but for many. Well, as we continue to wait for that to play out, one thing that is super encouraging are these wins that our legal team was able to accomplish on behalf of these Christian teachers. Let's just start with the public school teacher in Albemarle County. Bring us up to speed on that one. Yeah, so we'll put her picture up here on your screen, and her name is Michelle Karpovich, and she is a veteran teacher, has actually been in the field for a very long time, and she has served as also, in addition to being a teacher, she has also served as a faculty advisor for the Young Conservatives. She's been known about her faith, known about sort of her views that stem from her faith, and so she's been this overseer of the student club. And bottom line is, it was kind of a situation that happened very naturally, where her kids, after the election, they were excited about President Trump winning, and they came to her after he had won this big election. And now, the thing we have to back up and say is Albemarle County. This is a very liberal school district, and they have been on top of her. It's like she's been being dogged constantly for her views. So this is just another example in her career where they are just constantly on her. So basically, these kids. If you're a student and you're in this school district is very left. Right. That's the teacher you're going to go to if you want a safe place to talk about Trump winning. Yeah, I don't think there's any question. It's a very natural situation that played out. And so basically, the way I understand it is they were wanting to celebrate, and she said something to the effect of, "Well, we can't really toast. Like we can't really, you're underage. We can't really drink alcohol." But we could have a toast together of something, of tea. Sweet tea, I think was what it was. And she met up to do that with them outside of the class time, so not during a class. I believe it was a lunch period. And basically, she was slapped with a school investigation and threatened with disciplinary action. If it didn't, it would be funny if it wasn't for the fact that it actually happened. Okay. Yeah, there's an investigation over toasting with sweet tea with the students. I mean, this whole thing. So they basically come and investigate her, and they tried to claim that she had inappropriate conversations around alcohol with minors. So all this because she... And I want to stop right there, because they're claiming she's having an inappropriate conversation about alcohol, but actually... And she literally said... She said, no, we can't do that. We're going to use sweet tea. Yeah, so there's that. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And she had just mentioned that, like, she had seen conservative commentators raising a glass of wine or scotch or whatever, after Trump's victory, in the same sense with saying the kids couldn't do this. So anyway, it's insane, but they basically tried to claim she had violated the district's. They also tried to claim that she had violated the district's political activities policy, even though all she did was celebrate the results of an election with students who came to her. Right. Like, she didn't do this in her class. Yeah. She didn't provoke this with the kids. Well, I have a hard time believing this kind of investigation, threats would happen if she was celebrating with the students Kamala Harris winning. No, there's no way this would have happened if it was on the left in that school district. And and more than that, teachers don't lose their freedom to have free speech rights. They don't lose that when they walk through the school door. It has to be within reasonable limits, and it's not intended to be pushed on children, right? Like, we're not trying to indoctrinate kids into political views, but that is not what was happening here, and I think it's just very typical of a left-wing school district to come down on a conservative teacher in this way.
Yeah, so it does seem pretty obvious that the school district crossed the line here in trying to punish her for someone that was just trying to express support in a conversation, natural conversation with students. But what finally happened?
Okay, so she thought she was going to be actually fired because there's this disciplinary action. And so she reached out to our attorneys at Founding Freedoms Law Center, who immediately sent a demand letter to the school officials defending her constitutional right for free speech. And basically the school backed down and dropped this investigation of her.
That's huge. And I think it's encouraging for other teachers out there, or if you're listening to this and you know teachers that are dealing with these kinds of situations, I do encourage you to reach out to our legal team, Founding Freedoms Law Center, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to reach them.
Well, and they're incredibly creative because this same teacher had a battle with the school district about, they had pride flags, and she really challenged them, like, why do I have to have this pride flag hanging here? And they said, it's not a political, they said, the pride flag is not political. It's actually a human rights issue. So she actually spoke with our attorneys, and they actually decided if that is the case, if it's a human rights issue, then she could hang a pro-life flag. Oh. And she has successfully had a pro-life flag hanging in response. So our attorneys are creative at helping you work through these things and really challenging the school to be even-handed in the way that they view political activities.
Because it does make you wonder if certain teachers get targeted more than others. Because,
exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, speaking of that, there was another case involving an elementary school teacher named Ashley Pack in Fairfax County. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so this involved an elementary school teacher. I think we need to keep emphasizing this. We're talking about elementary school, and it's in Fairfax County, the largest, most well-funded school district, and we, because of that, we do think it's important precedent. Like, we do think, these kind of things really matter. But basically, what happened was the county was trying to force her to undergo special interactive training on LGBTQ issues.
Of course.
I forgot the plus. All those things, including their radical and so forth transgender policies.
Yeah.
We're all in all of that. And some of that policy can include the whole hiding things from parents' part. So,
all right, when you say interactive, what are we talking about here?
All right, well, the training required her to interactively engage with the materials and then affirmatively agree to fully comply with their LGBTQ policies.
Okay, so we're not just talking about someone passively watching a screen. This is
Which I still hate that they have to do that, but that's a side point.
So you have to engage with this and confirm.
Yeah, I mean, but as a Christian, like, Ashley can't simply confirm this. Like, that's not something her faith will allow her to do in good conscience. And I would say those kind of policies are in violation of state law. They're actually in opposite of what we legally should expect teachers to do. So nevertheless, this training thing is not just this school district. We have seen it in others. So this is something we continue to see in these school districts. And this is in our view, this is a practice of government coercion, requiring these teachers to deceive parents and use inappropriate pronouns, and then to have to, this idea of doing interactive training to affirmatively agree, that's a whole other level.
That is, yeah. All right, what was the outcome here?
All right, so I'm happy to report, in this case, our law center, in partnership with another group, America First Legal, was able to successfully defend Ashley. And so our attorneys drafted a demand letter. A lot of times, they don't expect the teacher to fight back. And so they know they're doing something that pushes the limit, but they don't think they're going to encounter resistance. So sometimes a demand letter is enough. And so with this demand letter, the district did back down and agree to accommodate her faith.
And that's interesting because here are two cases where it was a demand letter that accomplished the purposes. And it almost seems to me, I'm not speaking for our legal team here, but that these school districts, a lot of times, maybe they know they might realize they're not on solid ground. And so when they get that demand letter putting some sunlight on this, oh, we're not actually operating on legal principles here, so we're going to back off.
Yeah, and I think it's just important that teachers have the courage. Michelle, the first teacher we talked about, spoke at a conference recently. We got to share her story at a religious freedom conference, and she put forward this idea of and she's this tiny, she's just not the super tallest individual, and so she's behind this microphone, and she says, I may be small, but I have courage, and she described herself like a little chihuahua biting at the heel, and literally it became almost like a tagline at that conference, Chihuahua power, you know. But I think teachers need to think of themselves as it doesn't take a lot to push back, and especially if our law center is going to be behind you, but there has to be, these schools should expect resistance when people are asked to violate their conscience and do things they don't believe in.
And for too long, they haven't had any. Imagine what happens if these people don't speak out. You're going to have hundreds of teachers that we never hear about having to be silenced and coerced into these things. And it's just super redemptive what they were able to do. And I want to encourage people, especially this Fairfax teacher. I mean, as Victoria said, this is one of the top funded schools in the district, one of the largest. And I think a lot of people just sort of feel like Fairfax is a lost cause. You can't do anything redemptive because a lot of people have tried to go up against that school district and failed in standing for, kid-friendly things and protecting parental rights. And here, this one teacher, and that's where I want to encourage people. Your voice can make a difference. I want to encourage them that way, but also the importance of reaching out to Founding Freedoms Law Center, because it wouldn't have happened if she had just spoken up and that's it. She needed the legal team coming alongside her.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I mean, for folks in areas like Fairfax where the school board is voting against good principles, in large numbers, they can keep passing bad policies, but they can't pass unconstitutional policies. They can't violate state law. They can't violate your own religious freedom. And so that's where they get shut down. So sometimes, unfortunately, we want you putting pressure on that school board and constantly pushing up against them so they know how you stand. And ultimately, we hope we change out these seats where people are just violating parental rights. But if that is not currently happening the way you want it to, we need to make sure we still push back on these things that are just absolute violations of people's religious freedom or their freedom to speak.
Yeah, and I just had this crazy thought that, it looked before we were so crushed and oppressed with this trans agenda in our schools, and now things are changing, and we have the momentum to make a difference in this. And I think of that Johnny Cash song, That Will. You know that one? That Will comes around.
I honestly gotta be honest. I know Johnny Cash is huge. It just wasn't huge for me, so I don't know.
Well,
if I heard it, maybe I would know it.
I'm just saying we got to hang in there because you never know when things are going to turn around, and they do turn around. But it's important to stay in touch with our legal team that can help you. So what do people do if they want to get in touch with the legal team and they want to support the work they're doing?
Yeah, so foundingfreedomslaw.org is where you'd go website-wise. And then I'd say you can always call the Family Foundation. They're obviously part of us, so connecting through us is a great way. And yeah, I think it's, do you need help? And also, do you want to help with underwriting the work that these guys are doing? Because that's the beauty for the clients, is that they're not paying attorneys to do this. It's your donations and all the folks that support this work that actually fund us having attorneys and then being able to do this work so that it can be free to the client. So this might just be something that you say, I can actually step up and be a part of helping, even though I don't personally have a religious freedom issue at stake.
I think that's so important, and I think our legal team is only going to have more and more needs thrown at them in the next few years, so support is important. Well, hello, everybody. We are dropping in again because we have another late-breaking update for you. This keeps happening, but I guess that's a good thing because we're on top of the news and we want to keep you up to speed as soon as it happens. And we just got this update after we were talking about Wilson Farber, the realtor, earlier. We just got an update on what happened from his hearing. You want to tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we sort of predicted it a little bit that unfortunately he did not win his appeal because, again, these are this hate rule in and of itself is a ridiculous speech rule. So he has now been found guilty, whatever that means in the associational context, and he's been fined and he's been told he has to take, I'm going to call them indoctrination trainings or, go to re-indoctrination camp or whatever. Hillary, remember when Hillary wanted to put us all in camps? That's whatever that is. He's got to do that.
Definitely re-education.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I'm sitting here thinking about what we were talking about with the teacher, with Ashley,
right,
and this whole thing where she had this interactive LGBT training and all this. And I'm a little worried that it's that kind of training.
Yeah, I could see this turning into another one of those kind of cases. So what does our legal team do now, Victoria?
Well, I think they're looking at all their options. And one of our teammates made the comment, like, also knowing what the federal government is doing with all these trainings, it is kind of funny to think about anybody doing DEI training right now that includes all this stuff, because the federal government has basically just said, no, we're not interested. So this thing better be funded privately and not with some government money.
What if it does? Yeah, what if it does?
Hey, Trump, defund these specific trainers so that our guy doesn't have to go through indoctrination. But I don't think he's going to do it. I mean, I just don't see our guy saying,
Wilson Farmer,
I don't think our client's going to go,
it's not going to be interactive and
he's not going to go,
things.
okay, yes, I'm willing to be educated on this whole matter. I mean, he's a pastor, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that to say, our legal team is reviewing all their options, and I guess we'll have to give another update when they make their next move.
Well, like we said, please keep him in your prayers, and our legal team as well, as they continue to try to defend all of these people who find their faith under fire. Thank you for continuing to support the work we do and share the information. And remember, if you want more people to hear these messages, share the Speak Up Virginia playlist. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, audio only platforms like that, you can give us a 5-star review. That helps get it out there. And remember, we are stronger when we speak together.